All right, so obviously this question is testing apostrophes, and we need to know those rules. I have a separate lesson on that, but it's doing it in a way that's unusual. It's testing the apostrophe with like a normal word, and then the word its, which is one of those things we cannot forget how to use, okay? So we know that in general, apostrophes are used to show possession, okay? So when we read the sentence, we should be asking ourselves, is there something possessing something else, owning it, belonging to it, right? So those are all ideas that are associated with apostrophes. But with the pronouns specifically, the rules get kind of messy. So let's just dive in and look. I'm going to skip the first sentence because it doesn't matter. The punctuation is in this sentence. Let's focus on that. According to Lorenz's metaphor, the wind from a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil might eventually grow into a storm elsewhere across the globe. So you might get worried and be like, oh gosh, where does wings have an apostrophe before or after the S? I forget those rules. Well, you don't need to know them for this question. Sometimes you do, but rarely on the SAT does that rule matter. What matters more is whether we need an apostrophe at all. So in this case, we don't need one because the wings don't possess anything, right? The butterfly possesses the wings. So there's your possession, but the wings themselves don't possess anything. So wings doesn't need any apostrophes. So before you lose any, get all stressed out, figuring out whether the apostrophe goes before or after the S, just take a breath. You might not need the apostrophe at all. That's very common on the SAT. So don't let them bully you into putting one. Now that also answers the other question for us is, does its get an apostrophe? And as I said, there is possession here. The word its is possessive. The its is the butterfly, and I'm going to write it with an apostrophe, because if it said the wind from a insect, or the butterfly's wings, it's hard to change it without changing the sentence too much, but flapping its wings, that we're talking about the butterfly, and so the butterfly does possess the wings, and so it would get an apostrophe if it were the word butterfly with an S. So what's happening? Why then does its not get one? Well, pronouns are different. Basically, possessive pronouns do not get an apostrophe. It's just a weird quirk in English. So its with no apostrophe is possessive. But its with an apostrophe is a contraction of it is. You need to know this. So this is one of those things that even people whose only language is English for some reason do not understand and do not get. And you cannot be 17 years old and not know the difference between the different versions of its. It's going to come up in your life. I promise you, it will come up when you write and text and email and all these things, and people will judge you if you get it wrong consistently. So you have to know this rule, but it is kind of counterintuitive because we associate apostrophes with possession, and yet we have this one weird exception where it's not about that. It's just the word its, for whatever reason, when it's possessive, does not get an apostrophe. So try to memorize that. It is important, but it is not usually tested when they test apostrophes on the test. Usually it's much more about whether we have regular old words and whether they get apostrophes or not. Just to kind of round out the rule in case you're curious, this version of wings would be plural because the S comes before the apostrophe. This version would be singular. So if for some reason we were talking about wings in a possessive way, we would need the S and then the apostrophe because it's multiple wings. The butterflies have multiple wings. So that's what we would need. But it doesn't apply here. So don't get all worked up over it unless you actually need to. So first think about whether you need an apostrophe at all, and then you can worry about where it goes. And most times you won't need to worry about that at all.